All right, today we are going to be making the Jelly Scale Turbine Fidget. This is a variation of the Turbine Weave by Steampunk Garage, modified for jelly scales. And what makes this so unique is the jelly scales. It lets you literally fidget and bend the rings around a center ring, and it's honestly really awesome and fun if you are a fidgeter. If not, you can still get some pretty cool designs out of it at the very least. But what you are going to need are obviously your pliers. You are going to need 30 small jelly scales, and jelly scales are something that I do sell on my Etsy shop. They have a link below. I also have a link for a kit for a turbine fidget below if that is what you're interested in. But jelly scales are made from a PVC jelly vinyl fabric. They are flexible and obviously translucent. The ones that I have glitter in them. I also have another line that has a little bit less glitter in it, not as many colors. Those are called sparkle jelly scales. I call these ones glitter jelly scales, but jelly scales. And they are 60% lighter than aluminum. If purchasing something is not something you're able to do, I do have a cut file for these scales on my Etsy shop as well for tiny, small, medium, and large scales. You will just have to front the cost of cutting machine or find a friend who has one, and go from there. So if you don't have the money to, invest into jelly scales, maybe you have the time. So the cut files are there for those who are in that situation or just want to make their own because maybe they're going to go through a lot. I don't know. I don't care. Taking down the cut file is not something I plan on doing. I do want jelly scales to be something everybody has access to, whether you buy them from me or make them yourselves. I am happy to share this space. Anyway, tangent over. So you're gonna have 30 small jelly scales. You're gonna have a macrame ring. For the kit, it comes with a 2-inch macrame ring that is 3 millimeters thick. And then in the kit, I do have 62 rings, but you do only need 60 rings. These are going to be 18 standard wire gauge, 3/16 ID, or that is an inner diameter of 5 millimeter. One thing to note is I have had a little bit of feedback that the 3 millimeter macrame ring with the inner diameter of 5 millimeters plus the thickness of the jelly scale, which if you buy mine is going to be 0.7, 0.8 millimeters thick, does make it a little bit of difficulty. To cause a little bit of difficulty. So if you want a little more wiggle room, I would advise purchasing 18 standard wire gauge, 7/32 ID, because they have an inner diameter of 5.8 millimeters, I believe, and that would basically negate the thickness of the jelly scale and give you that full 2 millimeters to work with. And I think that would definitely make it a little bit easier for you if that is something you are concerned about. But let's get into it. So we are going to take our macrame ring and we are going to take our first scale. And I should mention, because I forgot, I have 2 different methods on how to do this in my tutorial. We are starting with method A, and that is going to be going scale by scale. Method B, you will see later on, is a little bit different. But we're going to start with our macrame ring, our loose scale, and our first ring. We're going to put the ring through the scale, go under and around the macrame ring, and close. And one thing I find is with method A, since everything's gonna be a little bit loose, to keep track of your scales, it is a good practice just to put it on top of the macrame ring and hold it there while you work your way around. As you can see, I am starting with the ring to the left. If you start with the ring to the right, that's just fine. Just make sure that is how you do it the whole way around. Otherwise, it's not going to work out for you. But I'm right-handed, so I probably just prefer working to the right, whatever. So this is how I'm going to do it. So we have our first scale, ring to the left. I do kind of sometimes like to pull the tip out too, just so it does sit like this. That way I have access to this nice and easy for my next scale when I weave it in. But we're gonna go ahead and grab our next scale, our next ring, go through the loose scale, and then we are going to go through the attached scale and then under and around the macrame ring. And now we're going to grab our third scale. And once again, I'm going to grab our scale, a ring, go through the loose scale, go through the top attached scale, then under and around the macrame ring. And as you can see, at this point, we are kind of getting a little bit of a pattern in here where the scales are kind of acting as steps going up. That is what you want to see. If you have one that is on one of the previous scales you entered, one of the previous scales you weaved is on top of a newer scale, something went wrong and you'll have to just go back and troubleshoot that, but it should basically look like stairs. So we're going to keep going here. Scale 4. And again, you're going to take your ring, go through the loose scale, go through the top attached scale, under and around the macrame ring. Now, I don't know if I mentioned it, the rings in the kit are spring tempered, so they are a little harder to work with, but that's what I buy, so it's what I'm also selling in my kits. And again, our next scale, we're going to take our ring, go through the loose scale, go through the top attached scale, under and around the macrame ring, and close. And again, I'm going to let you look at that. We're getting our little steps there. So the backside looks basically the same, just opposite. But I'm going to go ahead and speed this up a little bit. And we're going to get to the next part of method A. So if you do want to make your own jelly scales, questions I have been asked are, where do I get PVC jelly vinyl from? And the answer is, I've gotten mine off of Amazon. The sparkle scale line, I actually do get that fabric from a fabric store. So some wider range fabric shops may sell it, but not all do. So, you know, definitely hit up your local one-off fabric store to see if they have anything by the yard. Otherwise, Amazon does sell it by the vinyl roll. I use 30 gauge thickness, which is 0.7 to 0.8 millimeters. That is just my preference. I've seen a lot of 0.5 millimeters. That should be fine. It's obviously not going to be as thick or as sturdy as the thicker millimeter, but I don't think there's going to be anything wrong with it. Like I said, I do sell the cut files on my Etsy shop. If you have any questions about how to cut them out, I will do my best to help you out, but I am not a cutting machine expert. I do use a Trinket. I have the original maker, and I do have the how I do it instructions included with the cut files. So you basically know everything that I know. Any troubleshooting, I'm gonna recommend you reach out to Trinket or your cutting machine company. I unfortunately can't help you troubleshoot that part. But if you have any questions about the weave, please do not hesitate to reach out on Etsy. I am happy to help you figure it out. I am willing to work with you. I am terrible at explaining things, which is why, you know, this is probably my second time recording this tutorial. But you know what? I am willing to work with you and try and help you succeed, because that is ultimately what I want you to do. Some great things about jelly scales, obviously, is they are very flexible. They are 60% lighter than aluminum. They are scratch resistant, water resistant, almost waterproof, I would say. I've definitely left actually these scales sitting in water for probably a week due to some fun humidity issues with the cutting mat adhesive getting stuck to them. So they were in there for a week and they are just fine. And they do, you know, have obviously some concerns with breaking compared to metal scales. Obviously metal scales will eventually break, but I just finished a 6-month R&D on these in a bracelet form where you were, you know, putting them from over your fist to over your wrist, and they're gonna hold up. These are gonna last you as long as you are not intentionally trying to break them or being very aggressive with them. For the most part, and for most people, they will probably last. But anyways, back to the tutorial. So as you can see, this is going to be method A. I'm going to be doing method B with the rest of the scale, so I'm going to be stopping here to move on to part 2. So as you can see right now, all of our scales are facing the middle and they are having that stairway. And if you recall looking at this, they are all following the curve of the macrame ring. So this next ring, which I'm going to let you look at how this looks on the back here, this is literally just linear scale mail. So if you're not familiar with the linear scale mail weave, I highly recommend you go and learn that one, and then you will have basic understanding to fall back onto for this weave, because literally it is linear scale mail wrapped around a macrame ring. So hopefully having that knowledge base will help. But we are going to start pulling the scales so they follow the curve of the macrame ring. And as you know, I'm sure you noticed when we are doing this part, we are kind of working on the inside of the macrame ring. But now we're going to flip these and work on the outside of the macrame ring. And again, they are still making kind of the steps, but this time it's going down. If so, like when they're in here, you're going up. Now they're going down. And so the reason why I want you to take note of that is because these are loose and are going to spin until we add this secondary scale in. They have the ability to spin independently. They'll no longer have that ability. Words are really hard. I'm sorry. They'll no longer have that ability once we start attaching them. So we are going to go 2 scales at a time here. And so previously, and so when we work from this direction, it looks like I was working on the right side of the scales. So now you want your ring to go to the left side of the scales. Obviously, if you started opposite me, you're going to continue to be opposite me. But what we're going to do is we're simply just going to take this and go through our first scale and then our second scale, and then we're going to close. And that is all we are going to do on this side here. And then one thing I want so you to make note of is to push your ring down, because your second ring, you're going to want it to look like it's like that. So you'll have 2 rings on each side of this scale, but that is what it's going to look like. But anyways, so we're going to go through this first scale, and then we're going to grab another scale, and we're going to close. It's always the fun when they have the ability to twist this much, is they will get in your way. But just be patient. You will get through it. I believe in you. And so again, we're going to go through that first scale, which was the previous second scale, and now we're going to go through a new second scale. And so as you can start to see, this is kind of tucking this in a little bit, and it is starting to create that linear scale mail weave. Let me take a second, take a sip here. My soda. And so this is the look we want it to start making, is just so it looks like linear scale mail. And this is where it starts. As you can see from that, it is starting to pull it so it follows the curve of the macrame ring. That is what you want to see. If you are not seeing that and you are still having them point like towards the middle only, I would double check your connections to make sure you're weaving your rings correctly, the correct direction. Because if you go incorrectly, so I'm guessing it would be putting a, I'm not actually entirely sure how that would work, but if you have this scale in incorrectly, or ring, excuse me, I am terrible at interchanging those. But if you have this ring in these scales incorrectly, it's not going to start pulling this along with the curve. It's going to leave this like this. And that'll be one way you can know you have something wrong, is it's not doing what it's supposed to do. But anyway, we are going to return back to this. I'm going to go back on the outside because it is easier to do this on the outside curve than the inside curve. And again, we're going to go through our first scale, our second scale, and close. And then we're going to swing down our next scales. We're going to go through our first scale, which was previously our second scale, and our new second scale, and close. And as you can see, I completely did not attach these two. So let's fix that. I am human. Am I like not attaching any of these? Goodness. I'm just pretending I know what I'm doing. But see, I missed that and I made this mistake. So now I just have to make sure I go on the correct side of the rings. Otherwise, we're gonna have some problems. Thankfully, like I said, this is the importance of having that previous knowledge of the linear scale mail weave, is you'll be able to look at that and be like, wait a minute, I did something wrong. So thankfully I caught that before we got too far along here. So it's a nice, easy fix. But I'm just gonna go ahead and finish connecting these. And if I think of any other questions I have gotten. I do offer other kits currently. I have a listing for 2 different keychains. A linear keychain, I don't have a tutorial for that one quite yet, but that may change in the future. So if I do eventually have a tutorial for that, it would date after this one. And then just a classic scale weave keychain. So, and eventually I plan to have a dice bag available as well, but that one, to follow my dice bag tutorial that I make, it has 192 scales in it, so that's a lot of scales to count and have available. So we're not quite there yet. I'm working on a restock currently. And if you find this a little too fiddly to do this second part where you're just going in and attaching these scales individually, that is where you may prefer method B. Method B, we actually attach the outside of the weave first. So we just do it backwards. But I'll have to hang tight for a few minutes for that one. And so as you can see, this has pulled the scales to follow the curve of the macrame ring versus allowing them, to point to the middle. So that is how you will know if you are doing this right is, are your rings getting pulled around the curve or not? If not, obviously do some troubleshooting, try to figure out what's going on. And if you are, awesome. Get these last two scales here. And this is method A, and you would just continue on until all the scales are attached. And then a thing to note here with scale, the first scale we did, we have this random ring right here. This is going to actually be the ring that the last scale gets attached to this scale by. So that's why it kind of seems a little random right now. So you will have to remove this. I will show that at the end of method B here, because I'm going to just continue weaving from this point for method B. But this is what this should look like. You just, like I said, you have the linear scale weave, and that is all this is. So I'm gonna go ahead and set this to the side here, and we're gonna start with method B. So method B, how I like to do this is I like to make a chain out of my scales. I just find it a little easier to work with that way. So what we're gonna go ahead and do is we are going to, like I said, we're starting on the opposite side of the weave. We're doing this backwards. So we originally started with scales on the left. I did, at least, going to the right, but now we're gonna start with scales on, and by scales I'm doing rings on the left. Now we're gonna start with rings on the right. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna stack 2 scales, and we're just going to put a ring through them. Keep it to the right, and we're gonna go ahead and push this up. Grab another scale, stack it, and again on the right side, we're gonna put it through the top 2 scales and close. And once again, if we keep holding it here, you can see they're on the right. We're gonna push that top scale up, stack a scale on top of it, and go through the right side of the ring. Scale again, excuse me. And as you can see, if you hold this chain out, these scales are going to be going different ways. That is what they are supposed to do. One thing I want you to pay attention to is which scale was your very first scale, because that is the first scale you're going to be attaching to the macrame ring. And if you have it upside down, you're gonna get confused. I speak from personal experience. So don't do what I just did. So make sure you're keeping track of which ring and scale you put in first. As you can see how I just did that there. There's a little bit of some twisting to get this back to the way it was, but we'll get there. So we're gonna go ahead and stack our scales, put the ring through the right, and I'm just gonna go ahead and get all these scales connected. That is one thing that I do like about having patterns, especially with a few different scale colors, excuse me, is it's easier to know which one is the first scale that we want to put on the macrame ring, since the pattern, we're going to have it go a certain way. So this is basically what your line or chain of scales is going to look like. You can take another sip here. Okay. And like I said, we want to, excuse me, we want to start with the first scale that we put in the chain. And we are going to start how we started the exact same way last time. And that is going to be, we're going to take the first scale, we're going to put a ring through it, and we're going to go under and around the macrame ring. The only difference is there is now a chain of scales attached. So, I'm going to go ahead and just attach this right away because it's going to annoy me otherwise. So bear with me a second here. Actually, no, I'm not. You know what? I changed my mind. I'll figure it out later. All right, so this is what it kind of looks like. And as you can see, our scales, excuse me, are going other way. So what you're gonna want to do is you're just kind of gonna flip it, bring it around, and your scale should be going the right way. So again, we have our top scale, and then we have our scale already connected, and we're gonna go through both of those scales, under and around the macrame ring. And once again, we have our scale, we're gonna flip it over, move the ring to the other side, take a new ring, go through this top scale, through the bottom scale, under and around the macrame ring. And as you can see, we just have 3 rings there, but it is the start of that linear scale weave again. So that is why I do stress the importance of learning linear scale mail. Having that knowledge to fall back onto is going to be very helpful if you, for some reason, start running into issues. And then you should be able to troubleshoot it. If not, like I said, I will happily help you the best that I can. I'm kind of terrible at explaining things, but I did just get through helping somebody with this. And we were able to get it figured out. So she was able to finish it and it turned out perfect. Again, I prefer reaching out on Etsy just because it's easier for me to keep track of my Etsy things that way. I do have a Facebook page for the Noble Trinket, but messaging is not allowed on there because I get too many spam messages and I don't want to deal with them. If you are a part of the chainmail community, you will know who I am and probably what my personal Facebook is. I prefer you not send me messages on there. Will I still answer? Yes, just not my preference. Mostly because I just get confused when people have the same name. If I don't have an order or like a trail of messages to associate you with, I may get confused if your name is Samantha, especially. There are a lot of us in the chainmail community. So and obviously, you know, if you've never ordered from me, we may not have any history on Etsy. So like I said, Etsy is my preference, but if you message me on my personal Facebook page by happening to find it, because I am not sharing it, I will still respond. And so we're just keep going here. We're doing our little flipperoos. We go through this top scale, through the top connected scale, under and around the macrame ring. And like I said, I find this method a little easier because it already has the stability in it that is making the weave curve to the macrame ring. And so it's keeping it out of your way. It's not sitting here annoyingly spinning individually and then you have to unspin it to figure it out. And that is why I prefer this method. But if you prefer the other method, there is nothing wrong with that. I personally just find it a little too fiddly. And it involves more thinking than I generally like to do with some weaves. So a lot of the time I like to just kind of zone out while I do my scale mail. So and that is probably why I've had some feedback that these 5mm rings are too small, which that is valid. But for me, I think it's the importance of the ring around the macrame ring and just how beautifully that actually fits. And again, just a little close up while we're close here. And I don't know, I don't think sizing up to 7/32 or even 1/4 inner diameter is going to really matter. But 1/4 is going to be a pretty huge jump. So if you find rings in between those, that would work too. I would just advise the 18 standard wire gauge. Our last ring or scale. I really just like that. All right, so, and you who would have all done this in one go and not separated it into 2 different methods, you are now just gonna have one scale lunch to connect. So we're gonna go ahead and do those ones. So what you're going to do to connect, because this ring needs to go right here. So we're going to go ahead and remove this ring from around the macrame ring, but we want to keep the scale through it, basically. Because the very first scale, I don't do that. So we're going to just pretend that never happened and put that through the scale. So the very first scale that you put becomes this top scale here. And if you remember, we go through a top scale, through a bottom scale, and then under and around the macrame ring. So that is all we're going to do here. It's through that top scale, which is the very first scale we put on, through the bottom scale, which is the very last scale we put on. My goodness, words are hard. Under and around the macrame ring and close. And then one thing you will have to do is connect these two. So as we did before, we're gonna go on the right of this ring and then on the left of this ring and just through those 2 scales and connect them. And then because I started that second weave here, I'm gonna have to go do this again. So that works out in case you need to see that again. So again, this very first ring that we put on this very first scale is going to be attaching here on this very last scale. So we're going to take it off from the macrame ring. This time I'm going to try and leave it around the scale, but we'll see what the universe allows me to do. Okay, so it's through the scale. We're going to twist this around a little bit. So let's do this top scale. We're gonna tuck this all in so it'll, and of course I lost the ring again. Oh lordy that scale, and they will get nice and snug there. So we have to go back through this scale, and then we're gonna go through the scale, under and around the macrame ring. And that is the wrong ring. I'm telling you all the problems you can have today. Seeing it here live, folks. Live as in a recorded video. Okay, let's get that back facing the right way here. So through the top scale, through the bottom scale. I normally don't have this much problem, as you just saw. So sometimes, and I'm guessing it's because I don't have this ring open enough. Just needs a little more. All right, so we go through that first scale, and I'm holding it really crappily too. So through the first scale. Oh my goodness. Through that second scale, under and around the macrame ring. And that is it. Just kidding, we still have to do this side. All right, so we got that first scale on the right side of the ring, and then we go to the second scale on the left side of the ring. There we go. That is the weave. We've got our linear scale mill there, and we've got our continuous linear weave there. Hope you enjoyed. Have a great day.